is essential to Christianity. And it looks at the bottom, says it is a legitimate and essential function to Christianity. And page 47 to 48, note, there are plenty of people who are interested in tearing down. There's never a shortage of people that want to tear down other people. They are in abundant supply. There's never a dearth of pile-oners. Just never ceases to amaze me to see some of the stuff on social media where one person may comment about maybe having a negative experience at a restaurant or with a school teacher or with the school or whatever, and then that thread turns into about 500,000 comments of people ready to pile on that specific issue. So, there's never any shortage of people who want to be negative, but to people that want to be positive, not as a great supply. And so you look at the top, page 48, it speaks about blessed are the encouragers whose words and deeds sustain the energy, enthusiasm, and drive of people attempting to change the world for them and themselves for the better. And so we want to be the kind of people that encourage that type of change when people are dedicated to change, and especially when we think about people that are dedicated to change in a religious sense. Again, it never ceases to amaze me when I hear people speak negatively about people who want to try to live right. In other words, they've lived wrong for a long time, and then they want to try to live right, and everybody says, they'll never make it. Somebody says, they'll never make it. He's been turned that way for too long. He'll never live right. And and I just think to myself, I know too many examples of people that turned it around to think that a person can't change, and so those types of things bother me. Look, they may be right. There are a lot of people whose attempt or their run at living the Christian life is short-lived. But when we see people that genuinely want to change, we need to encourage that and try to foster a mentality that we believe in you. Because a lot of times the reason people live the lives that they do is because people don't believe in them. The bar's been set so low that's their expectation for themselves, and when we set the bar low for people, they're always going to meet it. And so as we think about raising the bar, we encourage people so that we believe in you and we're willing to help you. And if something happens on the way and you come up short, that's not the end of the road. In other words, this is not you're going to try to live right until you make one bungle or commit one transgression and then you're out. And so we want to be the kind of people that help folks believe in themselves. And then he talks about, and I'd never thought about this as we were going through this lesson, these lessons, says the command, and I'll just kind of summarize, the command to love, the command to comfort, and the command to do good are essentially all commands of encouragement. In other words, encouragement is not a different command than love. And encouragement is not a different command from comfort. And encouragement is not a different command from doing good. When we love people, it encourages them. When we comfort people, it encourages them. When we do good to people, it encourages them. And so all of these other admonitions that we have in the New Testament are actually, could all fall under the heading of encouragement. And so I liked the way that Brother Johnson put that together. Now, looking at 48, the next main heading on people need encouragement. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this. It's mostly dealing with the classroom setting, but I want to go again to the main thought as it introduces this section, that People want to know that they are valued and that people believe in them. The goal of encouragement is to help them value and believe in themselves. They need to develop confidence in their abilities and learn how to benefit from mistakes rather than being devastated by them. And then I want to focus just a moment on this next line. They need to enjoy compliments and evaluate criticism by using the good without internalizing the bad. I want to just sit on that just for a minute. Of course, we've talked about getting people to believe in themselves by telling them that we believe in them. But I like the statement about they need to learn how to enjoy compliments, because some people they don't feel comfortable receiving compliments. Maybe because they've never been encouraged. They've never had anybody to compliment them in any way. No matter how good it is, it's never quite good enough. What you did was good. What? But this could have been better, or you could have done this, or you shouldn't have done this. And so it's never good is never good enough. Well done is never well. And so people need to have the ability, we need to help people develop the ability to accept compliments. And another way that people have difficulty accepting compliments is if you compliment them, then they will immediately downplay what they did. Rather than just saying, thank you very much, I really appreciate that, they'll downplay it. They'll say, yeah, but I could have done this better. Or, in other words, if somebody's not there to criticize them, they'll be more than happy to criticize themselves. And so by helping people believe in themselves, that we help them accept the encouragement that we provide. And then learning how to benefit from mistakes rather than being devastated by them is goes in hand with the second half of the next sentence on evaluating criticism by using the good without internalizing the bad. People that do not have adequate self-esteem cannot evaluate criticism. Now, what do I mean by evaluate criticism? What do I mean by evaluate criticism?
Use it as a learning opportunity.
All right.
They just take it as being critical and they get the feelings hurt.
All right. Now, and what you said on the first half is also where I'm going with this, and I don't remember exactly how you said it. What did you say exactly? Say it again if you can.
If I said it 2 seconds ago. They don't use it as a learning experience.
All right, they don't use it as, all right, something of it. They don't use criticism as a learning experience but again, it's because they can't evaluate criticism. They just accept it as being valid. And they don't consider whether or not the criticism is valid or the source of the criticism and so the ability to have confidence in oneself allows one to receive criticism and evaluate it. And by the way, evaluate it just simply means to determine its worth. To determine its worth. And so, but people that don't have adequate self-esteem just accept all criticism as good and right and valid and you're right. Now, you can evaluate criticism, find out what's good and proper in it without being devastated by it, because some of it may be good and helpful, but some of it may not be correct. But again, it takes self-esteem to be able to separate those two things from one another, rather than just accepting it and taking defeat. And so I just really like what he talked about with the ability. I like the term evaluate criticism. And self-confidence allows people to evaluate criticism. All right? In the last line of that paragraph, they need to develop the capacity to find humor in minor disasters and remain composed in stressful situations. And that's a great, that to me, Bill Burke may be the greatest person that I know at this. That when something, something that's not major goes wrong, you can always count on Bill to say something that really lightens the situation. I mean, he has he has a natural ability to do that, and I love, that's one of the things I love about him, because if you ever travel overseas, nothing ever goes exactly the way that it's planned. A train can be late, miss a connecting flight. I mean, any number of things. Your room's not booked right, there are any number of things that can happen that can be minor problems. They're not disasters, but sometimes people treat minor problems as disasters. But the ability to take that thing and make something humorous out of it, like the time Bill got the two of us lost in Rome. We have laughed about that more than anything, because Bill said with a pretty high degree of confidence, I'm pretty sure we came from this direction right here. And it was the exact opposite. And so we went back that way, and the farther we went, the farther we got from the way we wanted to go. And we have laughed about that. In the interim, I can't tell you how many times Bill and I have been somewhere, and we're talking about which way we're going to go, and he says, look, I have a keen sense of direction. And, that's all he has to say, because we know what happened in that situation. And so he just has he has a great way of taking a minor setback and making light of it, and doesn't lose his composure in potentially stressful situations. All right. So then the next 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs talk about the teaching environment, and this will be helpful, especially for all of our teachers that are teaching our young people's classes, about that you're never going to step into a perfect teaching situation. In other words, you don't either not in school, and not even in Bible class. You don't come into the perfect situation where every kid's had a good night's sleep, every kid's had plenty to eat, every kid's had a stress-free day or a fairly stress-free week. There's been no strife or difficulties that are weighing on them, and they're there, and they are wide awake, they're alert, and they've got their Bibles open, and they're ready to learn. You just don't come into those situations. And this section is important, especially for teachers, to understand that sometimes there is a considerable gap that needs to be bridged with the kids, and that one way to bridge that gap is by being an encourager. In other words, no matter what has happened at home in the last week or the last month or whatever or is going on, that some word of encouragement helps bridge that gap and creates a more suitable and complementary learning environment for our students. And so I would, especially all of our folks that are teaching our kids, spend some time there. But I want to go to page 49 on motivating the unmotivated. This is still more classroom setting, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time dealing with this. But the last line in that first paragraph, in motivating the unmotivated, is that learning has much more to do with the student's interest than his intelligence. I can't tell you how many times through the years I have listened to Rhonda lament over students who are C and D students that have far and away enough ability to be A and B or A students. I mean, they have the intelligence, but they just don't have any interest in learning. And it doesn't matter how intelligent a person might be. By the way, a lot of serial killers are geniuses. So if you just want to get right down to it, they're crazy intelligent. But that doesn't mean that they're motivated to learn or do right. And so we want to, again, approach our students from the standpoint of creating interest in what it is that we're there to do, rather than focusing on what we might perceive their abilities or inabilities to be. And so the bottom of the second paragraph of that same section, all things being equal, the teacher who relates best will have the best success. The teacher who relates to his or her students the best is the one who has the best success. And he talks about in that section that you can have the best decorated classroom, and you can have all of the electronic gadgetry that's available, but a teacher that doesn't relate to his or her students is going to have a hard time getting those students to learn. This is one reason I think Jeffrey makes a pretty good teacher. Look, there's no way Jeffrey's the sharpest teacher out there. It's not. I mean, he's not genius level. All right. But nobody loves those kids. I say nobody. A lot of the people don't love those kids like he does. And so because he loves the kids and they know that he loves them and they love him back, it makes teaching easier because there's this give and take of appreciation. Sure. I mean, look, I had some real geniuses, and I'm talking about real geniuses in college. But the teachers that I felt like I learned the most from were the ones that made the connection. And I had some really, really good teachers that were also really, really smart, and those are the ones I really enjoyed. The ones that really had a lot of ability, and they were able to create that environment or that one-on-one. And so as we think about the ability to teach, the first thing we want to make sure is that those that we're trying to teach understand that we love them, we appreciate them, and we want to help them. And so that's the section there on page 49. And then the bottom, we mentioned this already a little bit, but the last paragraph from 49 to 50, students enter a typical Bible school classroom with gnawing hunger pains in their souls. They hunger for love, recognition, affirmation, and or respect. And so at the bottom, many children are relationally emaciated. They're overfed and underloved. I never thought about that, but that we can provide all of the necessary physical things that children need, and none of the emotional things. In other words, we can make sure they've got a roof over their head and that their clothes are clean and they've got 3 squares a day and adequate medical care. And there are a lot of kids out there that have those things. Of course, there's a lot of kids that don't have those things, but there are a lot of kids out there that have those things, but still they don't have any ability to develop relationships because their parents are too busy out doing their thing. And they think as long as Junior's got a roof over his head and the nicest clothes and money in his pocket, that he's going to be okay. And he'll know that I love him because of all these things, all these things external that I've provided for him. And of course, that's a recipe for disaster. And so I just thought that was an important point. Now, moving to the very bottom of page 50 in the time that we have left. Again, 48, 49, and 50 are dealing with the classroom situation. So again, to those that teach, these are areas where we want to spend some time and think about these things. But 10 reminders for encouragers. Now, one thing I like about this 10 reminder list is that they're scriptures. There's a point to be made, and there's a scripture for it. For example, remember to encourage others the way you would want to be encouraged in their situation. This is a very important thing, and this is something that has really hit home for me in the last 2 or 3 years as I've tried to spend more time visiting shut-ins. A lot of times it is difficult to visit shut-ins. There are a lot of, there can be any number of barriers to visiting shut-ins. I'm talking about people that are shut in at home, people that are in nursing homes, or even, I wouldn't say an assisted living is technically a shut-in, but there's a limit to how those folks, a lot of those folks can get out and about. And I can remember growing up that my grandpa always carried me to the nursing home, always. From the time I was 8 or 9 years old, when he went to the nursing home, I went to the nursing home. I learned how to say the prayers for the Lord's Supper at the nursing home, because every 2 or 3 months it'd be his turn to carry the Lord's Supper to all the shut-ins, and I'd go with him, and he taught me, and that's how I learned those things. But the other thing I learned was not to be afraid of the nursing home. I've never been afraid to go to a nursing home, but I can remember, and we'd have singings every month at Dexter. We had singings in the nursing home, and those are all great memories. But I can still remember there were people who adamantly refused to go to the nursing home and go sing. They wouldn't go visit the nursing. They wouldn't even walk in a nursing home for whatever reason. And I'm like, well, you better hope you don't ever end up in a nursing home. You better hope you never end up there, because it's going to be a bad situation for you. And again, I don't understand it, because that's just not the way I was raised. But there ain't nothing to be afraid of in a nursing home.
When I was little, Mother took me to the nursing home in Barnabas.
Uh-huh.
And some man grabbed me, scared me to death because I was little, terrified me, and I would not go back. I mean, I would now, but I'm saying that was traumatic when you're 4 or 5 years old.
I'm sure.
So, but it makes my heart beat pretty fast. Because that was traumatic.
Yeah.
Even though, I was little.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Of course, I ain't never been grabbed in a nursing home, so. But, all right, so then you have, of course, obviously what the text there is Matthew 7 and verse 12. Do to others as you would have them to do to you. Again, number 2 is the counterpart to that. Remember that people are inclined to treat you the way that you treat them. Given it shall be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over shall men put into your bosom. For the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. Number 3, top of page 51. Remember that your time and talents and treasures are heavenly trusts for encouraging others. And there's a lengthy text from Philippians chapter 1, but to me the emphasis there that now Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. And so, Paul spoke about his life as first of all, that his life was not dear to him. Paul was never, he said, I don't hold these things as being, my life as being dear to me. He spoke of having the sentence of death in himself. In other words, I'm not afraid to die. And so when I'm not afraid to die, then I understand that what I have is to be used up in the service of the Lord. And so, and perhaps nobody outside of the Lord ever exemplified that to a greater degree than did Paul. Number 4, remember to prize people above everything else other than faithfulness to God. In other words, people are God's most precious possession. That's just, humanity is the crown glory of God's creation. And because of that, and because every man and every person, every man and every woman, every child is made in the image of God, then every person is to be valued and treated with respect. And so we want to prize people. In Mr. Avery's funeral back in December, one thing I mentioned was, I wonder how many people walked through that nursing home and never knew Mr. Avery. He was you couldn't really get to know him. You just had to know. You would just know how he was because of his mental deficiencies. He wasn't a warm person. He couldn't reciprocate love and goodwill. But you could know him, and what a pleasure it was to know that guy. And I thought about how many people just walked in there and and day after day and just thought there's just some old crazy guy that can't take care of himself. And you think about what did they miss? What did they miss by overlooking Mr. Avery? And so the ability to prize people above everything. Number 5, remember that every act of encouragement is an act of love for God. And every act of encouragement is an act of love for Christ. That's 5 and 6. And let me just add this while I'm kind of in that nursing home mindset. I try to see a lot of people. I go on Mondays, and I always go on Mondays, always go on Wednesdays, and I'm usually there 1 or 2 other days during the week. And I try to see a lot of people. But in order to do that, you don't get to spend a lot of time with a lot of people. But people appreciate every effort that you make. If I stop in and see, Miss Key, if I go see Miss Key and I are going to have the exact same conversation every time I go. Every time. She's going to ask me, where am I now? And I say, I'm still preaching at Burleson. And then she's going to respond the way that she does. And then we're going to have the same 3-minute conversation every single time. But every time she hugs my neck. But I know how it's going to play out every time. Or I go, or Miss Bell. But those people appreciate any bit that they get because so many of them get so little. And so the point I'm making is it doesn't take a lot to mean a lot. There are other people that I go and I visit. I visit, like Rose or Pat, or a lot of times I'll try to go on Mondays when the activity room opens, so there'll be about 10 or 12 in there at one time, and I can go spend a few minutes and laugh and cut up with all of them. But every little bit, counts, I would say. And so just remember, it doesn't take a lot of time to do a lot, I guess is the way I would say it. Number 7, remember that one day you must account for every relationship God has placed in your care. It's required of stewards that one be found faithful. I would add, to whom much is given, much shall be required. And we've been given a lot of opportunities. Number 8, remember that encouraging is a daily privilege and responsibility. Exhort one another daily while it's called today, lest anyone be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Number 9, remember that God encourages us that we may encourage others. We mentioned this verse last Sunday morning. Our God is the God of all comfort. And on top of that we can encourage others with the comfort wherewith we are comforted. In other words, whatever we receive from God, we can give to others and should. And then 10, remember that church assemblies are great opportunities to encourage. And of course, the passage there from Hebrews 10:24, and 25, exhorting one another, and so not forsaking the assembling yourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. So there are 10 reminders, scriptural reminders for encouragement. All right, next Wednesday night, page 57 On the mind of an encourager. That will be the 19th. The mind of an encourager.